Now, you may not have heard because for some reason the press isn't really talking about this. I mean, it largely ignores what's happening in the House of Lords. But anyway, on Wednesday, there's a Green motion in the Lords that can block the government's legislation that will outlaw strike action for many public sector workers. It's called a fatal motion. This is something the Lords can do, rarely does. But there is something there on Wednesday where Green Party peers have introduced a bill that can block a fundamental attack on trade unions' rights and workers' rights that this government is getting away with, largely uncriticised. But it's bad news for all of us if it does happen. Now, you would expect two things that will lead to this passing, because A, the Tories have a minority in the House of Lords, they don't have a majority, so they can be outvoted if the other parties work together. B, the Labour Party has a large number of peers and is fundamentally, supposedly, a pro-worker party funded largely by the trade unions and has many members who are active in trade unions. So you'd have thought it was a slam dunk, right? You'd have thought that the Labour Party would vote for this fatal motion, this Green fatal motion, and protect the right of workers to strike. But that is not a given. How do we know this? Well, because the Labour Party has a policy of not voting for motions from other parties, which is stupid and tribal and pathetic, but that's the way the Labour Party is, I'm afraid. And B, they could have done exactly the same if they'd supported the Green Party motion to protect the right to protest. There was a fatal motion which the Greens brought. The Labour Party abstained. So we know they abstained on ways to stop the removal of fundamental rights in this country. But their excuse is, well, if we did that, what would happen if we got into power and the Tories blocked our motions in the Lords? But think of it this way, the Tories can't do that for one thing, they haven't got enough Lords. But also, there's a massive difference between legislation that you might not like, but isn't a fundamental change in the way this country's run. There's a massive difference between that and bills which actively end the right to peaceful protest. They criminalise it, which has already gone through. And now we're talking about ending the right of many people to strike. You know, democratic conventions might say that Labour shouldn't support fatal motions, but this government has repeatedly thrown away and laughed in the face of democratic conventions. And we see this all around the world. The hard-right populists know that the left in general, and I'm using that as a very broad term, make great noise about following the rules. You know, they use facts in campaigning and they follow the rules of democracy. And the right laugh at this. The right use this to get power. So we see this again and again, not just in this country, in America as well. You know, in the conventions that are around would, for example, have stopped the Tories from massively increasing the spending limits that parties can make on elections. So, you know, without fanfare, last week the Tories, I think, quadrupled the amount of money that parties can spend on elections without any great fuss in the media. And of course, the only people that benefits are the Tory party. You know, if you think there's politics is broken in this country because there's too much money floating about, then the government making it much easier for millionaires to fund their campaigns isn't going to help, is it? Because basically there's parties like us, like the Greens, who could never even approach the spending limits that there were before. But at least we had a vague chance that the Tories couldn't massively outspend us. You know, people would campaign on facts and policies rather than just barraging people on social media and TV and radio and leaflets. So, yeah, be prepared for the next election because Tories will be able to spend much more on you. So that's just, you know, convention would have meant that they wouldn't have done that, but they have, and convention would have meant that they hadn't lied to the Queen around COVID, but they did. And now convention that might be there saying you shouldn't support fatal motions in the Lords, which, let's face it, are a thing you can do in the Lords. They're not some sort of crazy breaking the rules sort of thing to do. The Lords, it's there as a safeguard. It's there if the Commons, and let's face it, a minority of the people in this country voted for the Tories, so they don't have some massive democratic mandate that means they shouldn't be blocked in any way. All this motion would do is bring down that particular bit of legislation and make them bring it back to the Commons for a proper debate, or maybe changing it in some way, I don't know. So, well, I guess what I'm saying is, although I'm very cross about this, if the Labour Party is for anything, it should be for supporting the rights of workers and the rights to withdraw your labour. I mean, that is the fundamental reason the Labour Party exists, right? So if you do have a Labour MP, bear in mind this isn't a vote for MPs, this is a vote for Lords, write to them, contact them, ask them to demand that their party whips their Lords to support this bill. Because ultimately this is a leadership decision, not a decision by individual MPs. But Starmer, if enough people write to their MPs and enough MPs have a go at him, he might whip them not to abstain this time and actually grow a bit of a spine and do something that isn't just never committing to any real, strong feelings about anything, which is what the Labour Party seem to be all about at the moment. Support the Greens. I mean, if the best thing you can do is join the Green Party, obviously, and support our peers. We've only got 2 peers. Look, they're the ones making all this legislation to protect your rights. So maybe back us up. But in the meantime, make sure you ask Labour to.